that was built in real short order in order to recover the railway to the safe running of trains. So if I'll share my presentation now. So James, could you just give me a thumbs up so you can see that?
Yeah, yeah, got it.
That's great. Thank you very much. Right, just 1 second as well. I struggle with the technology. Okay, so quite a dramatic image to start us off on the presentation. So this happened 11 months ago last year, 19th of October, when this freight train derailed at Petteril Bridge, which is right near Carlisle station, and it's on the Newcastle to Carlisle section where it derailed, but it right at the junction of where the Settle and Carlisle line joins the NEC lines. So as you look at this this image on the screen now, we've got the down line is the one closest to us, and Carlisle is to the left of the screen, and the Settle lines are to the right, and they swing off, and Newcastle is across to the right hand side. So if we can think back to so 19th of October last year, come through lockdown, we're on the run up to Christmas. We've got a lot of businesses that have been suffering through lockdown, so people are eagerly anticipating the Christmas rush for festivities, particularly in cities like Carlisle, all over the country. Weather's changing, and we've got a background of real industrial turmoil in the rail industry, which thankfully, for the Network Rail side anyway, we're sort of past that now. I know that's still continuing with the train drivers presently, but that's the sort of history and context at this time. So really, a bit of our infrastructure is taken out of use on the evening of the 19th of October. So this is a video that was taken when shortly after the train derailed. So on the 19th of October, a Class 66 locomotive, which was hauling 14 wagons, each loaded with 80 tons of cement. It left Clitheroe for Carlisle, and at Petteril Bridge Junction, where the SAC line joins the NEC2 line, 5 of the wagons derailed, and this destroyed a large part of the Grade 2 listed structure, the bridge, the track and the signalling. Excuse me. One wagon came to rest on the bank of the river, with the other in the river, and most importantly of all, there were no injuries, although we didn't quite know all that detail at the time. So when events like this happen, we kick into the GOLD command structure, which I'm sure many of you on the call will be familiar with, and that's to bring together all parties to form a coordinated response to the accident and manage the external communications. We've had a name change since, but at this time we were known as Works Delivery Civils, and Works Delivery Civils looked after the so they've got the IP side of infrastructure delivery, and we were the Works Delivery side to come out of maintenance reorganisation, broadly 10 years past. And for my part of the organisation, I looked after the Works Civils part from Euston to Gretna, and we're also responsible for emergency response activity. Although this one does take us to probably the largest and most prominent emergency response that I've ever had to deal with. So we took control of all on-site operations from Tuesday the 25th of October and created a site command structure. And this presentation details the teamwork that was created by the site command and focuses on the works to the infrastructure in order to bring it to a successful reopening of the railway on the 7th of December 2022. And to add to the enormous challenge that we face, this recovery operation took place in the worst period of industrial dispute to the railways in a generation. So this is the footage from the drone shortly after the event. So apologies if it's a little bit stuttery, but I'm sure this is to give you a scale of the scale of the recovery. So if I just look to pause the video, sorry about that. So this is the Carlisle's B&Q depot here. Here is the bridge where the guys are standing in orange, and the River Petteril runs underneath. You can just see it exiting here to the right-hand side of the slide. And there's a new housing development, or relatively new housing development, that you can see top right of the image. This is known as Tramshed Way, which gives a little bit of a hint as to what this area of land was used for in the past. So this slide shows us setting up on-site and setting up the on-site recovery operations. So as I explained in the beginning of the presentation, these wagons were carrying cement, 80 tons of cement each, total weight of 100 tons. And in order to extract the cement from the wagons to make them easier to lift, we had to use effectively large industrial vacuum units to vacuum out the cement. More on that later on. So the video that was taken was 10 days after the accident and showing the start of the coordinated recovery operation. So firstly, the scale of the challenge. We had to understand quickly the size and complexity of the recovery operation and build the team. We had to manage stakeholders, internal and external resources, and coordinate and deliver a compliant and safe response. And all that, and maintain a positive media coverage to keep the local community on side, and deliver the recovery to the plan and provide a lasting benefit to rail users and the community. And in all that, negotiate the really difficult conditions that we're in with regard to the industrial dispute of the time. So next is constructing the team. So you can see from the images on the presentation that this was no small job, and the team that we put together, the sort of on-site command with safety and environmental specialists, network rail signalling, telecoms, track and off-track teams, the network rails works delivery, project management and construction teams. We had a specialist heavy lift contractor. We had the property team. We had the rail vehicle recovery team, our contractor AMCO and their design team, and the various statutory bodies that we had to liaise with for consents and permissions, as well as ORR, BCP and RAIN. One thing to note here, which is where we are different to perhaps all other civil engineering groups in Network Rail, is that we are a principal contractor, and we took over control of the on-site recovery as principal contractor for this work. So we had safety environmental specialists for the on-site water quality and environmental monitoring. When the rail vehicles were in the water, as I'm sure that most of you will can appreciate, a real concern for the Environment Agency and the general public was not necessarily the recovery of the railway and being interested in the technical detail there, but it was what's going to happen to the fish, what's going to happen to the flora and fauna of the River Petteril. River Petteril is what's known as a salmonoid river, so it has migratory fish, namely trout and other, and other fish as well. So we were doing regular monitoring of the water to ascertain if there was any diesel spillages in the water, any oil, and any cement, which would have obviously altered the likelihood of the chance of life for fish if there was a significant spill. So we were really clear in terms of making sure that environmental on-site monitoring was, of course, transparent, open. We shared our responses with the Environment Agency, and we quickly built up a great deal of trust there, which I'll come on to later on. Network Rail signalling, telecoms, track and off-track teams. So given the industrial dispute that we had at the time, there was two reasons for this. One, they are the best people for the job in terms of making sure that we've got the right skills to recover the railway, but also it sends the right message, both internally and externally, of an organisation working together to recover the railway for the benefit of rail passengers and rail users. And for that, we use the Carlisle delivery unit, which were really just over the road, so to speak, from where this accident happened. In terms of the civil engineering elements, the project management and construction, we use our own Networks Delivery Civils team. We also employed AMCO to do some specialist technical work to the structure and permanent and temporary works design. The wagons themselves, we had to get out of the river, and I'll talk a bit about that a bit later on. We used the specialist heavy lift contractor haulage and road traffic management in order to facilitate that. We had to have access through B&Q, and part of their parking and storage area was damaged by some of the actions about recovering, or what we needed to recover the rail vehicles, and we had to get land. We had to get a land access agreement with B&Q to get us in there to facilitate the recovery, and they were really helpful and no issues at all. In fact, surprisingly helpful considering the burden that we put on them in terms of access through B&Q's yard. We couldn't have done this without AMCO's design team, just mentioned earlier. They undertook the design for the permanent works and did a superb job in turning that round really quickly, putting all the work on the back burner and getting this permanent works design carried out quickly. We also did all the liaison with statutory bodies, the regulator, British Transport Police and RAIB. And then we on-site command liaise with Network Rail's Gold Command, and the Gold Command kept the formerly the EA train operating companies, the Network Rail route management structure, freight operating companies, and did all the media relations too. Excuse me. This was unique in my experience of a rail recovery operation. One, the industrial climate at the time was really testing. We had the environmental aspects of the recovery, and it was just coming out of COVID and lockdown. You know, the pressure that we felt as a team in order to recover this section of the railway quickly and as efficiently as possible, in order that the people of Carlisle and the residents, commercial owners and operators of the shops and what have you in Carlisle were as least affected as possible by this work. In other words, we wanted to get this up and running quickly, so that the Christmas spend was not, or as least affected as possible. So we had to manage the stakeholders, internal and external, keep information flowing between. And in order to do that, we had daily calls with stakeholders, and that a key part of that was to build trust. And one of the most probably the most, I would say, challenging, but if we got on the wrong side, it could have been a very difficult relationship. It was with our environment agency colleagues. So we had bi-weekly calls with them, and that quickly built up this trust between the two organisations, and these included senior members of the environment agency, and we kept them informed, included them in our discussions of the options that we were considering, some of the things that we found as well, and some of them, you know, that you might think some organisations wouldn't share, you know, when things probably hadn't gone to plan, or we'd found things out that maybe we should have been more open about in the past. You know, or we with the EA, you know, we had to say things that were sometimes quite difficult, and going beyond normal business boundaries. So what that did is that led us to a position where we had this trust with the EA that when we needed to do something to help protect the structure, because the rail vehicles were, you know, were one in the river and one on the bank, and this particular river is, as is Carlisle, is prone to flooding and high water flows, obviously because of the geography. And those of you who will recall, no doubt, the some of the news coverage of Carlisle being flooded in recent history, well, I'm sure we'll be able to understand the sensitivities around having rail vehicles, you know, on or about the river, and what this might do to the river flow and flooding as a consequence. What it did for us is it changed the flow characteristics of the water through the structure and started to very quickly accelerate scour at the location. So we undertook some works in the summer at the River Eden, and we built up from a difficult start, we built up a good relationship with the Environment Agency, and we looked to replicate a design solution here at River Petteril, similar to what we did at River Eden. And in order to do that, and to help prove that it would have no detrimental effects on the water flow at this location and any flooding effects elsewhere, we would normally undertake flood risk modelling. But here in an emergency situation and recovery, we didn't have time to undertake to gather all the data to undertake the flood modelling. The EA, however, do have these flood models, and they really, in very short order, in just a number of hours, did the flood modelling for us, and were able to confirm that our design solution to mitigate the effects of scour as a consequence of the rail vehicles being in the river, it could be done without detrimental effect to the to Carlisle and the environment around. And on that, we got an email from the Environment Agency's senior technical advisor, evidence and risk, a chap called Simon Lewis, and what he said is, this is the new way that we should be doing business together as two organisations. So it really does show how in difficult circumstances, by being transparent and open with external bodies and with your own organisation as well, you can quickly build trust and work together to a common aim of recovering the railway for the benefit of the community and rail users. So in addition to the conference calls, we provided daily updates in the form of presentations which were issued to the stakeholders, and this was essentially a slide deck that would come out and show what we'd done in the day, what we were planning on doing, and what our forward look programme would be. And what this could do is really pictorially show progress was being made, and it took away elements of surprise as to what the up and coming works would be. But this attracted media attention, as I'm sure you can imagine, and as a consequence of the media attention, I was invited on BBC Radio Cumbria, and I did 4 live interviews with them, 3 on the drive time show and 1 on the breakfast show on the morning of the opening, which was the 7th of December. And there's nothing like a live radio broadcast to sharpen your attention to whether or not we've got the railway open or not in the morning, and whether or not the first trains run on time. So to get the trains out of, or the carriages out of the river was no mean feat. This picture, or this slide here, shows the crane that we used. This took it took 2 weeks to get. It was working on a site in London and had to be de-rigged, the route planned, and brought to Carlisle. It came on 22 HGVs, and it's an 850-ton crane, mobile crane, and it was put together by, I think if I recall correctly, it was a 120-ton or something similar mobile crane that you can see on the right-hand side of the main crane. So this, we couldn't just place the crane there on the ground. I referred to what the use of the land was like, what it was used for historically. This was the relatively new housing development that you can see to the rear is called Tramshed Way. This was part of the tram sheds that served Carlisle in the past. So this was a lot of fill material had gone on here, and perhaps there wasn't the care and attention that we would have to place now in terms of how we would build the land up if we were using it for similar purposes today. So the site investigation showed that we needed to strengthen the ground. So in order to do that, we placed under each of those 4 outriggers, there are 350mm diameter piles, and there's 4 under each outrigger. The piles are around 14 metres long and filled with concrete, and then there is a 2 metre square by 1 metre thick reinforced concrete pile cap over the 4 piles, tying them all together. This crane was then set up over those piles and positioned so we could lift out the rail vehicles. Excuse me, we couldn't lift out the rail vehicles full of cement. 100 tons is just way too much to lift. So in order to get the cement out, we use those large industrial vacuum units that we had like effectively an elephant's trunk that went into the rail vehicle and vacuumed out the cement, went into recovery vehicles, and then were taken off off-site disposal. So this image is of one of the rail vehicles being lifted on the 12th of November, and just before it was put onto road haulage. But you can see, obviously taken by drone, and you can see the rail vehicle body here, how it's been bent as a consequence of the impact. This rail vehicle was on the bank and partly in the river, and this one had the police tape around it, preventing us from accessing that area, because there was a consideration that because it was on the riverbank and there was a pathway nearby, that we couldn't rule out that there wasn't anybody who was perhaps underneath. Thankfully, that wasn't the case. We didn't think it. We had no reason to suspect it would be, but the police tape remained in place until the lift, and we could only undertake the lift when we had the regulator, BTP, and RABE on site during this time. You'll remember when this happened. It's the 12th of November when this lift was being carried out, and it's Carlisle. It's north of England. It's likely to be windy, and we just managed to get a lull in the weather over 2 days. So the crane was ready to go on the Friday, but we couldn't lift on the Friday when it was able to lift due to wind. But the forecast was such that we knew we could lift on the following 2 days, and we did, and we got the rail vehicles out as planned. But it could have all gone completely wrong if we hadn't been so fortunate with the weather conditions. When this structure was, when the crane was rigged and the jib was upright, what I was told from people who in Carlisle, that this was the tallest structure in Carlisle at the time. So it's quite a significant piece of kit, this mobile crane. So I'm going to talk next about some of the civils bit that went into the recovery. So this slide is a picture of the so where we can see the reinforcement. That's where the down line was, and you can just see the remnants of the points as allowing the rail vehicles to come on and go off to the SAC line, which is sort of towards the centre and right of the image. And this is viewed looking towards Newcastle and Carlisle station behind the person who took the photograph. So we could only really get into the detail of what was needed in terms of the structure we were putting back after the rail vehicles were removed. And what we found is that there have been, in the past, there was a non-structural concrete slab placed over the bridge, which really messed us up in terms of putting this new reinforced concrete deck on. So what we had to do, we'd called on one of our specialist subcontractors, a company called Hole Masters, and they came and they used, referred to it as a cheese wire, effectively a type of diamond tipped saw looking like a cheese wire that cut out sections of this deck, and allowed us to lift the pieces out. So we cut out concrete to put concrete back, which I know is a little bit, there is some irony in that, but it was non-structural, non-reinforced concrete that we cut away. And what we put back, as you can see here in this image, is a reinforced concrete deck and L bars, and which will, the L bars to form effectively a curb upstand for to provide horizontal restraint over the structure should there ever be, heaven forbid, another similar accident in the future. So while that recovery was on, the SAC line and parts of the SAC line and parts of the NEC2 line were closed, but this gave us an opportunity, and so James and his team worked with the contractors, and effectively we did a year's worth of work that we would do normally on a Saturday night, over 3 weeks. We did 18 5-chain lengths of rock cutting work, nearly 15,000 meters squared of rock cutting D-veg, 478 meters squared of rock cutting descaling was removed, and we took away 200 tons of overburden as well from the crest of the rock cuttings. So this was carried out, zero harm, considerable cost savings, and we had 2 civil engineering contractors working together, sharing their access opportunity to deliver this work, and really showing that we'd thought differently about the opportunity that we could create, and we exploited it even in a really difficult situation, to give a lasting benefit to rail users and the communities that it serves. So this slide shows some of the works that were carried out, some of the descaling work, slope bottom left there, and top left is some rock netting that's been carried out, and then there's some devegetation works as well that have been undertaken. So all that work on the SAC, a little bit on the NEC line, and the works at the structure meant that we could bring the railway back into service. It was 8 weeks after the accident happened on the 19th of October. So this is an image showing, if not the first, then one of the first trains going across the structure on the 7th of December 2022, and you can see the new upstand that's been formed here. I showed you the L bars before, so that's the reinforced concrete upstand that we've put in, and you can see the new points track system taking the line towards either Newcastle or to the along the Settle and Carlisle line. So if earlier I mentioned that we were principal contractor, we used various specialist subcontractors for undertaking the works, including a principal contractor in their own right, or in this case here they were a subcontractor. And the graphic on this slide shows the recovery costs. So all the works at Petteril Bridge totaled 2.1 million. That was including the craneage. The maintenance and delivery unit cost, the OPEX costs, were $1 million. So it was 3.1 million in total for the recovery. We estimated it based on the unit rates that we have, how much it would have cost if it was a completely externally delivered. We've estimated 5 million for that, assuming maintenance and delivery unit costs be the same as $1 million. That totals just over 6 million, with broadly a 3 million cost saving benefit to the company, to the taxpayer, by managing, controlling, and delivering this internally. So over the 8 weeks, we removed 14 wagons, 80 meters of damaged track were replaced, 400 meters of cabling was installed for signalling and points, 2 switches were replaced, we placed 50 cubic meters of reinforced concrete, and we strengthened the arch closest to the to B&Q, just at the top there, with a ram arch spray concrete system, and we did it over 25,000 hours, 40 people forming a multidisciplinary team. We worked 7 days a week, 7 weeks, and in the worst rail industry dispute for a generation. So the railway, as it looks today, is there. So vegetation's grown back, nice sunny day, which people who live in Carlisle tell me that's virtually every day. So really pleased with the way it looks now. We've put some red sandstone on the face of the structure, just to because this was grade 2 listed, to bring it back to something that looks as close as possible we can the structure that it did before the accident happened. So that concludes the presentation on Petteril Bridge. I'd be delighted to take any questions.
Thanks, Mark. There's one sort of preloaded in the chat. So while others think and either put their hands up or type into the chat box, one from Conrad is, why did it take 6 days to get the team together? And how long does it normally take on average, considering 6 days in an emergency scenario sounds on the face of it a long time? Yeah,
well, you can see there was quite a sort of complex. This was quite a complex situation. It was the number of various disciplines that we needed was a factor, but there was some debate also internally as to who should do the recovery, and that did cause us a little bit of delay in the beginning, but once that was settled, then we took command of it and brought the people together. So I think that's a fair challenge, but there was this was a little bit different, and it was about putting together the right team and the multidisciplinary team that did take a little bit more time than normal. Normally it isn't that long. It's normally like a single asset failure, such as we might have an earthwork failure, an embankment failure, something similar, and then it's the teams are already established and it's more straightforward to resolve. Hopefully that answers the question.
Yeah, there's a hand up from Peter. I'll let him ask the question if he wants to come off mute.
Good afternoon, Mark. How are you doing?
Yeah, hello there. How are you?
Thank you very much for an excellent talk there, taking us all the way through that time last year. It wasn't part of your talk, and so I'm not asking for a lot of detail, but was there any infrastructure involvement in the cause of the accident, and did that then influence how you had to design and come up with your recovered and rebuilt structure?
Yes, there was the rail. If you can, so I don't know if I'll stop sharing. Is that has that stopped sharing now?
Yes.
So, yeah. So you recall the rail vehicle that was effectively in the water, that was closest to the B&Q side. That had a seized axle, and it was noticeable when you went when one stood and looked at that particular axle, the rail wheel had a significant flat on it. So, and what I'm told, and what I'll repeat as fact, but there's a caveat there, is that for significant distance, that had been dragged from Settle and Carlisle line and then onto this section of line here. So that was the infrastructure bit, the rail vehicle bit that caused the accident. But because of that, one of the options that I was looking at was to take we had an issue getting getting materials at this time, was to use the sandstone that was on the opposite parapet to rebuild the parapet that was in the water, because it was material that was already there. It was in keeping. It was grade 2 listed. It was in keeping, and that was one of the considerations that I put forward. However, the regional engineering team were really conscious that they wanted a solution, even though it would take longer to build, that if such an event would happen in the future, then the infrastructure is designed to withstand that impact. And that's how we ended up with the reinforced concrete slab and upstand that you saw on the slide with the rebar that was evident. So yeah, he did play a part in how we designed the permanent solution.
And you got some betterment in the
yeah
new design. Excellent. Thank you very much.
No, thank you.
There's another question from Conrad in the chat, which segues nicely from that, in fairness, which is, I note that there are S&C on the bridge. Surely this is a high risk. Was this assessed with a view to move these off the bridge during the design?
Yeah, it was looked at, but just the geography layout of the existing infrastructure with the Settle and Carlisle lines coming in. Right, I'll just share the last slide. Hopefully you can see that again. So this is can you see this slide here? This is the last slide as it looks today. Yeah, that's that there is the beginning of the Settle and Carlisle line. So it's we couldn't move it. So you move it towards Newcastle, obviously you have to replace part of the Settle and Carlisle railway, and you can't move it to Carlisle. So yeah, it was looked at, along with shunting it over as well, so closer to these low cabinets that you can see furthest away from the new parapet structure that we built. So yeah, we did look at that option as well.
Bro, a question from David Steer in the chat was, when did the design team for the slab/parapet get access to the site to measure the existing structure? And then a follow on from that is, how was the technical assurance of the slab design expedited? So I guess sort of a lift in the lid on the reactive world that you sometimes live in, Mark.
Yeah, it was armistice weekend, so it was I think it was the 12th, it was 13th, it was Sunday the 13th, I think. That's when we could get access to it. That's when the last that's when the last wagons were lifted. So it was only from that Sunday, Monday, could we get access and really think about what solution we were going to put in place. Sorry, I forgot the second part of the question.
It's around technical assurance. How was the design assurance expedited in an emergency scenario?
We had the project engineering teams and the principal route engineer teams. The old money was the RAM team, structures RAM, working with us and part of the calls, sharing the design proposals that as they were getting developed. So there was no surprises. So it was like a continuous assurance process, but involved all stages.
Well, are there any other questions from the call? Stick your hand up if there are. There's one that I'll, in lieu of that, put in, which is obviously this is a slide pack, Mark, that was put together for the Rail Awards, and generally it's a good news story. Is there any lessons learned in hindsight, or is there anything that we would have done differently in sort of an engineering context? I think with this being an engineering institution meeting, is there anything that we can take from this going forward?
Difficult one, that James. I think what would be really good to understand is, if we could have a suite of drawings for what, exactly how a structure's been built, that would help. But given this was, I'm told, well, it's obviously part of the original. It was an original railway asset built when the NEC line was built. So when we took the track at the downline, the downline track was pretty much smashed as it during the derailment. But that was only when we really started to understand what the existing structure looked like, and were able to inform our design solution. I think it would be more, what would have really helped is having a good set of as-builts, so we knew exactly, if we'd have known that concrete slab was in the way, we could have more easily designed around that. It probably would have saved us maybe 2 or 3 days, something like that. Not a lot in the scheme of things, but if you're a business owner and you're commuting to work and you're having to get the bus instead of the train, then those days really matter.
Bro, I don't think there's any other questions have come in the meantime. But that's just a thank you. So sort of,
thank you.
There's one from Tony. So I'll just read it out because I haven't had a chance to have a look. So lots of good work achieved in a much shorter period of time than if delivered in rules of the route. Have the environmental savings in terms of that shorter duration of work's been looked at? So I guess this is aimed at the sort of the CAM works, where we did a year's worth of work in 3 weeks. Tony says, I'm guessing that less shifts with plant and site setup, less fuel, less plant transport to site, impact on the local community, etc. It's a really good question, Tony, and I don't think we have done that analysis in terms of RRV transport, them being based on site and not having to on and off track, and even things such as hotel accommodation, transport of the site teams in a fairly transient nature that they ordinarily would be. I'm sure there were fairly significant carbon savings that we haven't accounted for.
No, I think that's a really good shout. I don't think we have, and I've done some international benchmarking in my time, and the railways in Sydney, if you can imagine the railways where Sydney is a hub of a wheel, and the railways come into that hub, they have a really defined closure period. So if you imagine working clockwise around the hub, this particular line closes this weekend, and it's from noon on a Friday till noon on a Monday, and you work round, and so you get long closures on a regular basis. And what's that the positive effect that's had for them is that they can flatline their resource demand profile, across the supply chain, and it's also linked into the various customers they have that use the railways. They've aligned their servicing around these closures as well. So I have proposed that in Network Rail, but it was considered to be fly in the face of the political will at the time, which was moving towards a 24-hour railway operation, or maximising the access opportunity for the Tox and the Fox, as opposed to the maintenance aspects. But I think that's where the real benefit is, and is having longer periods of time to do this essential maintenance activity. And it's so blindingly obvious for me. It's you're doing it in the day, so there's a huge safety benefit as well. You're not affecting people's sleep patterns. If something breaks down, people are more likely to be able to respond to come out and fix your plant, or sort you out, and you've not got everything concentrated around one particular time of the year. So I think that's the real potential benefit for the rail industry, but it's it potentially politically it's a very difficult sell.
Yeah, and I suppose the point I'd make on that, Mark, is we within CAM Civils Asset Management are sort of set up for fast reaction times and have remits of 2-hour timescales and a supply chain on call ready to go. But we were pretty much, we were the only bit of the business that were able to seize these opportunity works because of the sort of timescales and procurement and planning times that would ordinarily come in. So within the final 3 weeks of that 8 weeks, working closely with the site team, visiting site myself, and making sure that we had really accurate information of how long we were going to get, and maximising it was key.
Yeah, no, it was a real success, and we'll find out on Thursday night if people agree.
Yeah. Another question from you, Peter.
Yeah, well, good luck on Thursday. I was just going to ask you, it was another scope question in relation to the bridge works there at Petteril Bridge. As well as doing the remediation and getting some betterment on the remediation, was there any refurbishment or remediation on the unaffected portion of the structure that you were able to do to put that in a good place for the foreseeable future?
There wasn't much required, to be honest. Where at the B&Q end, I'm looking at the picture of the bridge here, so forgive me. So the B&Q end, the rail vehicle, the wagon hit the, I think it turned, hit the deck and locally flattened the deck. So that's the bit that we had what was termed as a ram arch, this reinforced concrete internal sprayed arch. The one things that we did was the scour protection. So that was probably betterment for the overall structure, but it was done as a response to the change in the hydraulic flow of the river around the rail vehicle that accelerated scour at that location. So potentially a benefit there, but it wasn't shown up as a high risk scour job. On the dry span, it was a 3-span arch, and on the dry span on the furthest away from B&Q, that had previously been strengthened with a ramp, which was a bit of a surprise to the EA, that one. So that's what we fessed up to during when we found out. So yeah, there was some bits that had already been done. So it wasn't like it was in a urgent need of repair, Peter.
And you've now got a good set of as-built records for
Superb.
If it should ever happen again.
Hopefully, yeah.
Fantastic.
Yeah, well, perhaps if it does ever happen again, it'd be somewhere else, and we can just take the lessons learned and use it. So, and ideally in someone else's region.
Thanks, Mark.
Thank you.
Bro, I don't think there's been any more questions in the chat. Just checking. No, and we're coming up for 6 o'clock, which is the hour mark and what people had sort of earmarked in the diary. So, are there any sort of closing comments that you wanted to make, Mark, or if not,
No,
we
just
can wrap up.
thank you. I really enjoyed the questions, so thank you very much for those. Got me thinking as well, James. Thank you, and thanks for the invite. So.
Thanks very much, and thanks all for joining.
All right, cheers. Bye now.